Good morning. Today we're doing another day of 4.5, but it is a little bit different than the previous day. Originally, we learned this equation, y equals mx plus b. M is our slope, always, which is rise over run, counting how many up or down, and then how many left or right from dot to dot. So, for example, from this dot to this dot, we could count rise 1, so that goes on the top, the 1, right there. And then we would run over 1, 2, 3, and that number would go on the bottom. So our slope would be rise over run 1 over 3. Our y-intercept is what we call b. That's where we begin our graph on the y-axis. So on our y-axis, this line begins at up 1 from the origin. And that's why it says plus 1. If it was down 1, it would be minus 1. So we're going to identify m and b in our first couple of equations. But before we do that, we need to make sure that they are solved for y, or that they're in function form. So in order to get y all by itself here, we need to move this x. This would be a 1x, so there's no number there. And it's a positive 1x as we see it. So to move it to the other side, I'd have to do the opposite, which is to subtract 1x. So 1 minus 1 goes away, leaves us with nothing. So we have 4y, and we cannot combine these, so write your x's first, negative 1x, and that's a positive 6 because there's no sign there, so plus 6. And then last we want y all by itself. It's not yet, it's really close. The opposite of multiplying is divide by 4. So 4 over 4 is just 1y, or y. 1 over 4 is not 4. It's still just 1 over 4. We can't simplify that, so leave it as 1 over 4, and it's negative x. And 6 divided by 4. We can simplify 6 divided by 4. We can divide by 2. We can't divide by 4 because 6 divided by 4 is not going to be a nice whole number. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we can leave it as 3 over 2. If you want, you could also write it as a decimal, which would be 1.5. I would accept either for b, but for m, our slope, we always want it as a fraction. So first, our slope, m, in this equation, because this is now written in the form y equals mx plus b. Our m, our slope, is negative 1 over 4. It's in front of the x. Don't write the x with the m. It's just what's in front of the x. It's just a number. And then b, whatever's added or subtracted onto the end, which would be 3 over 2. Or you can write it as 1.5. Alright, in the middle here, this one is already solved for y, so I'm just going to write y equals mx plus b. But what's wrong with our equation? Our x's aren't first. This is written with our x's second and just our b first, our number. So we can actually flip-flop this around so that we can read or match it up with the equation y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to write my x's first, negative 3x, and then b, and that's a positive 9, so plus 9. Now I can identify my slope, which is negative 3. As a fraction, though, put it over 1 always, because negative 3 divided by 1 is still negative 3. And then b, what's added or subtracted, it would be plus 9, or just 9. This one, we're always solving for y, and there's no y in this equation, so we have to instead solve for x. This is multiplied, so we need to divide by 8. 48 divided by 8 should give us 6. So we have the equation x equals 6, which is not y equals mx plus b. So instead, I would suggest making an xy table like we've done in the past when we get stuck. There's nowhere to put our equation in the middle because x is just 6. X is always going to be 6. So if x is always 6, this is where our table making comes into place from our last chapter. We like to choose the numbers -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. If you were to think about plotting this, x is always going to be at 6, and y is either going to be -2 or up to +2. So if we plot these points 6, -2, so x is 6 and down 2, then x is 6, down 1, I'm just plotting these points, then 6, 0, 6, we're not going up and down, then 6 up 1, and 6 up 2. So this is creating a vertical line, which makes sense because it doesn't have a slope. We know our slope as our slope man walking up, down, or a slope of 0. This slope is vertical. Our slope is actually undefined. And then B, does it cross our y-axis? Because B is our y-intercept. Where is it crossing the y-axis? Well, is it? If this line's vertical and this is our y-axis, there is none. And this is kind of a trick question. This is one that would just be like an extra one that you don't need to know how to do, but it might show up on a test on the MCA or something like that, so you might want to know how to do it. If you're stuck, make a table and just graph it. So now we have some graphs already here. We need to identify our slope. Our slope is the letter M, and our y-intercept, which is the letter B. So let's find M first, which is our slope. That's how we move, meaning rise over run. I'm going to write that here. So we're going to count rise first, up and down, and then run left and right. Oops. So from one point to the next, it even labeled it on here for you. This doesn't mean we're counting 1, 2, 4. It's saying we went up 1, 2, 3, 4. They already labeled that for you. So we know we went up 4. It's our rise. And over 1. If you want, you can simplify that. 4 divided by 1 is just 4. And then B tells us where we begin on our y-axis. So let's look. This is our y-axis. Where does our line cross the y-axis? So this line crosses right here, which is from the origin up 1. So we cross the y-axis at 1. Our next one, from this point to this point, we're going to count how do we move. What's our M? So we're going down 1, 2, 3, 4, and they already labeled that for you. We went down 4 and over 1. So the difference between these two is this one you went up, and this one we're going down. And again, if you want to simplify that to just -4, you can, but we like to write slope as a fraction. And then where does it cross the y-axis? Let's look. This is our y-axis. Where does our black line there cross? We cross right here, which is from the origin up 1, 2, 3. So +3. This next one, from one point to the next, M, how we move. First we're going down to, they even labeled it -2, and over just 1. Again, if you went from this point first and counted up 2, and to the left one, that would also be a negative, but you get the same answer. And then B, where do we begin on our y-axis? Let me erase this so we can see. We're beginning right there. That's where this line is crossing the y-axis, which is from the origin up 1, 2, 3. All right, next slide it says identify or find the slope, which is our M, and our y-intercept, which is our B, and then graph the equation. This one I was nice to you and already wrote it in slope-intercept form, so we can write y equals mx plus b underneath it to just match it up. So our m, right there in front of the x, is just -2. We always like to write slope as a fraction, rise over run, so we can put it over 1. -2 divided by 1 is just -2. And then b on the end here, which is 4. So we actually have to graph this as well. So I'm going to label it as my y-axis and my x-axis. And B stands for where we are going to begin our graph. So we're beginning at 4 on our y-axis. So we're going up 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a dot there. And then use your slope to create your line. M is how we move. First, rise, and then run. From the point. Some of you have been starting from the middle. Always start from the point you just plotted where it told you to begin. So -2 means we're going down 2 from this point, 1, 2. And +1 is to the right. We need to continue this until we reach the edge of our graph. So keep going down 2, over 1. Down 2, over 1. If you need to count like this, down 2 and over 1, go ahead and do so, but you don't need those lines. Down 2, over 1. And we only went towards the right side on our graph, so we can also do the opposite and go to the left. Instead of going down and right, the opposite would be going up and left. So we could go up 2 and 1 to the left. Up 2, 1 to the left. And then draw your line through. Make sure to put arrows on the ends. We're not just connecting the dots. We could have gone further in both directions. All right, another one. Write your equation y equals mx plus b right above it or below it. So our m in front of the x is 2 over 3. This one was already given to you as a fraction. And then b on this one, be careful. It's not just 6. There's a negative there. It's -6. So let's graph. Here's y, here's x. B stands for where we're going to begin our graph on our y-axis. This one's negative, so we're going down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then M is how we move. Rise over run. So from this point, rise 2, up 2, and then 3 to the right. Always up and down first, like our elevator goes up and down, then you got to get out and go over to where you need to get. So up 2, over 3. Up 2, over 3. Or the opposite of going up and right would be going down and left. So down 2, 3 to the left, down 2, 3 to the left. We made our line go from one side to the other, so we're done. If you have questions, please make sure to pause the video and ask, and if I'm going too quickly, know that you can pause the video. Alright. Next, identify the slope and y-intercept. This one looks a little bit different because we're missing b. If there's nothing there, we can assume that it's plus nothing, or 0. So identifying m first, which is 5 over 3. It's given to you there. And then b is 0. So we know we are going to begin at 0 at the origin. And then our slope is how we move, which is rise over run. So from this point, rise 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over 3 to the right. Positive numbers are to the right. I can't go down and left because there's not enough room on my graph, so I just have those 2 points to plot. That's it. And put arrows on the end. I would like for you to try this one on your own and then click play to see if you got the question correct. So first, our slope in front of the x, there's a negative there. Put the negative with the 3 or with the 4, but not with both, because if we have them both negative, well, 2 negatives make a positive, and that's not what it says. And then b, be careful again, it's a -2. So beginning on our y-axis, we're at -2. So plot your point down to, not on the x-axis. A couple of you have been making that mistake in plotting over here. We're starting on our y-axis, that's our y-intercept. And then M tells me how to move, which is our rise over run. It says -3, so down 3 and over 4. Well, I can't go down 3, I would be off the graph. So instead of going down and right, I can do the opposite and go up and left. So up 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now be careful when you're counting. Don't count the lines, count the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you wanted to count this way, same thing. Rise 3, run 4, because we went the opposite of what we have here, because it wouldn't fit on our graph in the other direction. All right, last two. Identify the slope and y-intercept. This is more what your next test will look like because there's no box for M and no box for B for you to fill in what those two numbers are. But if you want to make your own box, you can. So M, our slope, there's no number there, so we can assume that's a 1. So our slope is 1, or as a fraction, 1 over 1. And then B is a positive 7, so just 7. So hopefully you're getting the hang of this. B is where we always begin our graph. So up 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And our slope is rise over run. Rise 1, up 1, and to the right 1. Up 1, to the right. Up 1, to the right. Or instead of up and right, we can also go down and left. Down and left, down and left, over and over and over again. This one is the most points that we're going to plot. And put arrows on the end to show it could go on if our graph was bigger. Alright, last one. Again, this one looks funny because we're missing a number. We're missing B. There's nothing there. We can assume it would be plus 0. So our M in front of the x here is 4, or as a fraction, 4 over 1. And then B is 0. So we're beginning our graph at 0, and our slope is rise over run. Rise 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 to the right. Up 4, 1 to the right. Or the opposite of up and right would be down and left. Down 4, 1 to the left. Down 4, 1 to the left. Your line will always be angled one way or the other, unless it's vertical or horizontal, but it will never be right on this y-axis. If you don't make 4 a fraction and you just do rise 4, that's not going to make a slope of 4, that's just making a vertical line. So be careful and make sure that your slope is always written in fraction form. If it's a whole number, put it over 1 because now it's a fraction. 4 divided by 1 is still just 4. Alright, if you're in class, you have partner problems to do before you get your homework. So find a partner and you will each solve the problems. Both of you should get the same answers to the different problems that you have.